Do you ever wonder what kind of car some of these babes would lose their virginity in?
And I'll have to sit on his lap.
There's a number on the back. And pray that you never need to call us.
Do you remember those teen stars? The ones who lit up the 80s and then vanished without a trace? In the 1980s, teen celebrities shaped our afternoons, our walls, and who we wanted to be. But when the fame faded, what really happened? And why did we stop noticing? Amanda Peterson was a name you probably remember without even realizing it. If you ever watched Can't Buy Me Love on cable television in the late 1980s or early 1990s, then you know exactly who she was. Effortless, magnetic, and the kind of teen actress who just made sense on the screen. It was the sort of performance that did not seem forced or coached. It felt like someone you went to high school with had been plucked off campus and cast right into your favorite coming-of-age comedy. And for a while, it looked like she was going to stick around. Then, just as fast as she arrived, she was gone. See, Amanda Peterson had all the right ingredients. A lead role in a successful teen film? Check. Magazine covers and teen idol interviews? Check. She had the look, the smile, the charm, and the kind of on-screen presence that made casting directors pick up the phone. But unlike many of her peers, Amanda never transitioned out of the teen genre, and she did not want to. Not really. Once the spotlight began to dim, she quietly stepped away. She was just 15 years old when she starred in her breakout role. Imagine that. What people do not talk about is how young some of these stars really were. Not just in age, but in experience. The world expected them to be media-trained adults who could hold their own with the press, the public, and the pressure. But Amanda was just a kid, and by the time she hit her 20s, she had already had enough. She left Hollywood and returned to Colorado, back to something quieter, away from red carpets and auditions, and for a long time, no one really knew what happened. Her passing in 2015 came as a shock, but even before that, she had long vanished from the world that once lit up with her face. There are no grand farewell interviews or big final roles, just a girl who gave the world a perfect teen movie moment and then decided she had done enough. If Cory Haim was in a movie, you watched it. That is just how things were in the 1980s. The Lost Boys, Lukas, License to Drive. He was one half of the Corys, a duo that dominated every teen magazine, gossip page, and bedroom poster wall from coast to coast. But of the two, Cory Haim had a kind of vulnerability that stuck with people. That wide-eyed, sweethearted, I can fix him kind of energy that made audiences fall hard. He was not trying to be cool, he just was, and then he was not. When The Lost Boys came out in 1987, people realized Cory Haim was more than just a pretty face. He could lead a film. Carry it even. He brought humor and heart to horror, and he did it in a way that made teenagers feel seen. That is something you cannot teach. And yet, Hollywood did what it always does. It put him in box after box, typecast him, and pushed him toward roles that aged worse than anyone thought they would. The scripts stopped getting better. The pressure got heavier. Behind the scenes, Cory was already struggling. Substance use, studio demands, tabloid stories that aged poorly even at the time. But no one wanted to hear about that in the moment. People just wanted him to be Cory Haim, the same Cory Haim he had always been. But life does not work like that. He tried to come back, a few times actually. Reality shows, interviews, guest appearances, but it never landed. And after a while, people just stopped asking. He passed away in 2010. And even though he had not been on the screen much in years, it felt like something had gone missing. There is a strange ache that comes from watching a teenage hero grow up only to disappear. You start to wonder if we really saw them clearly at all, or if we just saw who we wanted them to be. Barrett Oliver was not the kind of child star who chased the limelight. He just had a face that directors remembered, a quietness, a depth, something that pulled you in. In The Never-Ending Story, he played Bastian, shy, thoughtful, bookish, and completely unforgettable. You were either Atreyu or Bastian growing up, and if you were Bastian, you felt everything. His performance in that movie was not loud or flashy. It was gentle and that is what made it work. He was not trying to be the hero. He already was. The Never-Ending Story became a massive hit, not just in box office numbers, but in culture, lunchboxes, bedsheets, quotes. It was one of those stories that felt too magical to be real, and Barrett was at the heart of it. But what people forget is that he walked away not long after. He did a few more films. Daryl, Cocoon, roles that still felt a little strange and soft and special. But Hollywood was not built for boys like Barrett. It wanted him to be louder, bigger, more of something he was never trying to be. So he stepped away. Not with scandal or headlines, just silence. He found a love for photography, not just snapshots, but actual historic printing techniques. He teaches it now, writes books, lives a life most of us never see. You have to respect that. The decision to leave before the world tells you to. No press tours, no red carpet returns. Just a boy who once saved a kingdom through the pages of a book and then wrote his own story off-screen. Christy McNichol was not just another teen star. She was the teen star. If you grew up in the late 1970s or early 1980s, you saw her everywhere. On magazine covers, in after-school specials, on sitcoms, and most memorably, in the film Little Darlings. There was something different about her. She was not just playing roles, she was living in them. Confident, vulnerable, funny, and intense. Sometimes all in the same scene. And when she smiled, it was like she was letting you in on a secret you really wanted to know. What made Christy stand out was how natural she felt. There were no airs about her. She was not trying to be glamorous or perfect. She was just being real. On screen and off. Little Darlings came out in 1980 and immediately resonated with a generation of teenagers, especially girls. It was honest and a little messy and completely magnetic, and so was Christy. She brought a tomboy edge to the glossy world of Hollywood, and people loved her for it. They trusted her. She was someone you rooted for. She felt like someone who had your back, even if you had never met her. And for so many kids figuring themselves out, Christy made being different feel okay. And then, one day, she was just not there anymore. In the early 1990s, Christy McNichol officially stepped away from acting. She had been struggling with bipolar disorder, something almost no one in the public knew at the time. She later said she wanted to focus on her health and happiness, which is as brave as anything she ever did on screen. Fame, especially the kind that starts in childhood, does not usually come with that kind of ending. She chose it for herself, quietly, deliberately. She has kept a low profile ever since, choosing privacy over press. She does occasional interviews, supports causes she cares about, and lives a life that looks nothing like the red carpet. And somehow, that makes her story even more powerful. She gave us so much, honest characters, brave performances, and moments we still remember decades later. Then she walked away with grace. That is not vanishing, that is surviving. Lisa Bonet was not like the others. Even in the carefully curated world of 1980s television, she stood out without even trying. Her character on The Cosby Show, Denise Huxtable, was stylish, unpredictable, artistic, and so clearly not acting. It was as if Lisa Bonet had just stepped into the role by being herself. Her presence felt real, wild in a quiet way, and everyone watching knew it. By the time she was cast in A Different World, it felt like her star was still rising. She had that rare thing, coolness that could not be copied. She wore what she wanted, said what she meant, and played characters that did not fit the mold. But Hollywood never quite knew what to do with someone like Lisa. She refused to shrink herself to fit expectations, and it made her unforgettable. Even when the screen stopped showing her face, her influence kept echoing in style, tone, and voice. Her off-screen life made headlines, marrying Lenny Kravitz, speaking her mind, choosing work that was bold and offbeat. She refused to play the game, and the industry did not take kindly to that. There were conflicts behind the scenes, rumors of creative tension, alleged disagreements with the show's producers. She was quietly written out of A Different World, and her appearances on The Cosby Show dwindled. By the early 1990s, Lisa Bonet was no longer on primetime television. For someone who had once seemed unstoppable, it was a strange and sudden drop-off. But here is the thing. Lisa Bonet never really disappeared. She just stopped showing up where people expected her to. She chose independent films over network sitcoms. She picked privacy over public approval. And while the world kept asking, where did she go? She was living, raising her children, being who she had always been. In a way, she vanished from the spotlight, but not from meaning. Her impact lasted far beyond her screen time. And for many of us, she will always be Denise, the one who dared to be different and walked away on her own terms. Robin Lively had the kind of smile that made everything feel a little lighter. If you have ever seen Teen Witch, then you know exactly what that means. That movie came out in 1989, and even though it was not a huge hit at first, it became one of those cult classics that people, quote, rewatch and quietly love. And at the center of it all was Robin, bright, funny, and charming in a way that made you believe in teenage magic. She was not the typical movie lead. She was awkward, relatable, a little offbeat, and that was the point. She felt like someone you knew, a girl from school, or maybe from your summer camp. And it worked. Teen Witch became her signature role, and for a lot of people, it still is. After that, you expected her to be everywhere. She had that one-in-a-million charm that made you root for her instantly. Even now, she feels like someone who could step back on screen and pick up right where she left off. But that is not what happened. Robin Lively did not disappear completely, but she definitely stepped out of the spotlight. She popped up in small roles here and there, but never landed another moment like Teen Witch. Part of that had to do with timing. The film, as beloved as it is now, was not a commercial success when it premiered. And in Hollywood, timing is everything. She worked on television. She did guest appearances. But the star power she showed in Teen Witch never got its full follow-up. And maybe that is okay. Not every teen star wants or needs to become a household name for life. Sometimes one perfect role is enough, especially when it sticks with people the way hers did. To this day, people still quote her movie, they still share clips, they still sing along. She might not have become the face of the decade, but she became a piece of its heart. And that is the kind of fame that never really vanishes. Noah Hathaway was a warrior, a symbol, a kid with wild hair and fearless eyes. When The Never-Ending Story hit theaters in 1984, there was not a single child who did not want to be Atreyu. Riding Falkor, braving the swamps of sadness, fighting to save Fantasia. Noah was not just acting, he was leading us. And for a moment, he was everywhere. But then, almost as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. Not in the way some stars fade into the background. This was something different. Noah Hathaway had the kind of screen presence that should have led to dozens of roles. Instead, his film career just stopped. He did a few small projects here and there, but nothing even close to the magic of that first big role. And it left fans wondering, how does someone so memorable vanish like that? What most people did not realize is how intense filming had been for him. He was barely a teenager, but he did many of his own stunts. That included dangerous horseback scenes and being submerged in water for long periods of time. Injuries happened. Recovery took time. And by the time he was physically ready for more, he had already started drifting away from acting. He turned to other passions, martial arts, motorcycle customization, teaching, things that felt more grounded, more in his control. Fame is a strange thing to step into as a child. It gives you everything and takes twice as much. And Noah, like so many young stars, decided early on that it was not worth the trade. These days, you might see him pop up at conventions or interviews, always warm, always grateful. But there is a distance in the way he talks about fame, like he knows what it asks of you. He lived the dream and chose to wake up from it. That might be the most heroic thing he ever did. Chad Allen was that rare kind of teen actor who felt like someone you could actually know. He was not larger than life. He was believable. And for a lot of young viewers in the 1980s and 1990s, that made all the difference. On My Two Dads, and later Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, he brought a quiet sincerity to roles that needed it. His characters were thoughtful, a little unsure of themselves, and full of heart. And so was he. But behind the scenes, things were more complicated. Chad came out as gay at a time when the industry was not kind to actors who did. A tabloid forced his hand in the late 1990s, publishing private photos without his consent. From that moment on, he faced the uphill climb of typecasting, judgment, and reduced opportunities. Hollywood had a long way to go, and he paid the price for that distance. He kept acting for a while. He even became a strong advocate for LGBTQ rights and inclusion in entertainment. But the roles got smaller, the offers fewer, and eventually he decided to step away entirely. Not in anger, but in purpose. He went back to school, studied psychology, became a clinical psychologist. Think about that. One of the most familiar faces of late 80s television, someone millions grew up watching, walked away from it all to help people heal. That is not failure. That is clarity. In a business that rarely gives people a second act, Chad Allen made his own. You can still feel his presence in the characters he left behind. And now, he shows up in a completely different kind of room, one that offers comfort, not applause. Peter Billingsley had one of the most iconic childhood roles in American film history. You can see the glasses, the BB gun, the pink bunny suit. Just hearing the words, "You'll shoot your eye out," is enough to bring it all rushing back. A Christmas Story was not just a movie, it was a tradition. And at the heart of it was Peter, wide-eyed and totally unforgettable. After that, you would think the sky was the limit. He had the look, the timing, and he already knew how to carry a film. But instead of chasing the spotlight, Peter did something very few child stars do. He stepped behind the camera. Not right away, but gradually. He took time to learn the business, and when he returned, it was not as an actor. It was as a producer, a director, a storyteller on his own terms. He worked closely with Jon Favreau, helped launch Iron Man, was involved in Elf. Quietly and consistently, he became a key figure in modern Hollywood, just not in the way people expected. And maybe that was the point. Fame as a child is not always a promise, it is a test. And Peter Billingsley passed it with quiet confidence. He has rarely acted since his Ralphie days. When he does, it is usually small roles or cameos, a nod to the past, a wink to those who remember. He does not chase nostalgia, he respects it. And that gives his story something rare: balance. Most people remember him as the kid who wanted a BB gun. But behind the scenes, he built a whole new legacy, one that does not need the spotlight to shine. Kim Richards had already lived a full Hollywood life before most kids had even started junior high. In the 1970s and early 1980s, she was a child star through and through, Disney royalty even. Escape to Witch Mountain turned her into a household name. With those wide eyes and fierce little stare, Kim did not just play a psychic kid on the run, she made you believe it. And when she looked scared, you got scared. When she fought back, you cheered. She carried the kind of magic on screen that most adult actors never quite figure out. By the time the 1980s rolled in, Kim was still acting, but her days as a lead were winding down. Like so many child stars, the transition into more grown-up roles was not easy. The industry has a short memory, and even shorter patience. She did some guest roles, took parts in horror movies, and stayed on the radar for a little while. But it was clear that the Hollywood that once embraced her had moved on. Or maybe she had moved on from it. There was something different in her story. Kim was not just a kid actor trying to hold on to fame. She was also navigating a complicated family dynamic, the pressures of the spotlight, and a business that does not forgive growing up. Eventually, the work dried up, or maybe she just stopped chasing it. Years later, she resurfaced. but not in the way fans expected. The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills brought her back into the public eye, this time not as a character but as herself. And it was raw, messy, emotional. The world saw a woman still grappling with everything that fame had once given and taken. For a generation that remembered her from Witch Mountain, it was jarring. But maybe also a reminder. Childhood fame does not fade, it echoes. And sometimes you cannot hear it until the world goes quiet. Jenny Quan had that energy, the kind that made you feel like something exciting was about to happen. If you watched California Dreams in the 1990s, you remember her right away, cool, funny, and totally in control behind a microphone. She played Samantha Wu, the band's lead singer with a killer voice and even better stage presence. For a while, it looked like she might be the next big thing. The show had everything teen audiences loved: surfboards, pop music, drama, and friendship, and Jenny stood out in every single episode. She was not just there to play a part. She brought a kind of sparkle to the screen that was hard to fake. And for Asian American girls watching, seeing someone like her front and center was a big deal. She was visibility, talent, and charisma all wrapped into one. But when the series ended, the wave she was riding just crashed. Unlike her peers on shows like Saved by the Bell, Jenny did not leap from one mainstream hit to another. She kept working, voice roles, guest appearances, theater, but Hollywood was not exactly opening doors, and it is worth asking why. Because she had the chops, she had the fan base, she had the voice. Part of her journey involved moving into voice acting, where she found steady work but far less public recognition. She voiced Suki in Avatar: The Last Airbender, which earned her a whole new fan base. Still, the spotlight she had on California Dreams never quite returned. And in an industry that often forgets the people it once cheered for, Jenny Quan became one of those names people remembered, but could not place. These days, she is still performing, still connecting with fans, and still showing up for the roles that matter. But for those who watched her in the 1990s, there is still a feeling of what happened, like she deserved more, and maybe she still will. McKenzie Astin never really had a choice about whether or not to be in the spotlight. When your parents are John Astin and Patty Duke, and your brother is Sean Astin, the camera just kind of finds you. But McKenzie held his own. On The Facts of Life, he brought a grounded energy to the later seasons, just the kind of fresh, likable presence the show needed. He was not flashy. He was steady. And for a long time, that was enough. He had something rare for a teen star: stability. He was professional, well-spoken, easy to work with. Producers liked him. Audiences liked him. And yet, his career never hit that next level. While his brother went on to star in The Goonies and The Lord of the Rings, McKenzie drifted between television roles and independent films, always working but never breaking through. You could feel the talent in his performances. He showed up in serious dramas, gritty thrillers, and heartfelt indie films, but the spotlight never stuck. It was like the industry respected him but did not quite know what to do with him. And when you are a teen star trying to grow up on screen, that can be the kiss of death. Still, McKenzie never disappeared. Not completely. He kept acting, kept trying, kept showing up. But the era that had once welcomed him so warmly stopped paying attention. And he faded from public view, not with scandal, but with silence. Looking back, you wonder what might have happened if one or two things had gone differently. If one big movie had landed, if one network show had stuck. But maybe McKenzie Astin did not need the fame. Maybe he just needed the work. And in that quiet consistency, he carved out something more honest than Hollywood usually allows. Tina Yothers was America's little sister for most of the 1980s. If you watched Family Ties, you remember her. Tough, funny, and not afraid to go toe-to-toe with Michael J. Fox in every scene. She played Jennifer Keaton, the youngest of the bunch, with a kind of no-nonsense confidence that felt rare for kids on television back then. Her delivery was sharp, her timing was perfect, and even in the background of bigger storylines, she never faded out. She held her own in a cast full of stars, and she was just a kid. Family Ties was one of those shows that defined a decade. Every Thursday night, millions of families gathered to watch it. And Tina Yothers was right there, growing up on screen, episode by episode. For many people, she became a part of their own family memories. The sarcastic remarks, the rebellious streak, the way she aged from precocious child to full-blown teen right in front of us. That kind of visibility shapes people. It also limits them. There was something incredibly familiar about her, like someone you knew from school or a neighbor you shared bike rides with in the summer. She was the kid who spoke her mind and did not care if it made the adults uncomfortable. In an era of glossy teen idols, Tina brought something real, and people clung to that. She became more than a character. She became a touchstone for what it felt like to grow up in that moment. But no one tells you what happens after the laugh track fades and the studio lights turn off. By the end of the show's run in 1989, Tina had been acting for over a decade, and she had hit that weird in-between zone where casting directors do not know what to do with you. Too old to play a kid, too tied to one role to be taken seriously in another. She took a step back, not because of scandal or failure, but because she needed space, and for a while, she disappeared from the screen entirely. In the 1990s, she re-emerged, but in a completely new form. She dyed her hair black, joined a rock band with her brother, and started performing music. It was raw, loud, and totally different from her TV days. Critics didn't get it. Some fans were confused, but for Tina, it was personal, a way to reinvent herself outside the tight frame of Jennifer Keaton. And if nothing else, it proved she was not afraid to start over. She appeared on reality television in the 2000s, took some theater gigs, did a few interviews, but never tried to reclaim her old spotlight. Maybe she never wanted to. Because fame, when it comes that young, always leaves a mark. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the thing that once defined you and find out who you are without it. Tina Yothers may have vanished from television, but for a generation of viewers, her voice is still echoing through living rooms, laughing at her older brother, rolling her eyes, and delivering that one perfect line. Lukas Haas had one of those faces you do not forget. Soft-spoken, intense, and with a stare that seemed to carry entire conversations without saying a word. When he starred in Witness in 1985, he was only 9 years old, but you would not know it from the performance. He played an Amish boy who becomes the key to solving a murder and somehow held his own opposite Harrison Ford. That was not just talent, that was presence. From that one role alone, it seemed like Lukas Haas had a clear path ahead of him. Critics praised him, directors lined up. He became the kind of young actor that serious filmmakers kept in their back pocket. He was never the loudest guy in the room, but that quiet energy worked. It made him different. It made him watchable. And for a while, it looked like he would be one of the rare ones, someone who could make the leap from child star to respected adult actor. He had this stillness on screen that made you stop what you were doing and just watch. Not every kid can hold weight in a drama, especially next to Harrison Ford, but he made it look effortless. He was not trying to be flashy, and that is exactly why you believed him. In a decade obsessed with volume and excess, Lukas brought something rare: restraint. That restraint, though, may have been what kept him from becoming a star in the Hollywood sense. And yet, the spotlight faded. He worked steadily. There is no denying that. Bit parts, indie films, the occasional supporting role in bigger productions. But something had shifted. He never fully landed a role that defined his adult career the way Witness had defined his childhood. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was Hollywood's shifting taste. Or maybe Lukas Haas never really chased fame in the first place. Off-screen, he stayed low profile. He has a passion for music. He collaborates with artists behind the scenes. There are no big scandals, no headlines, no wild stories. Just a guy quietly doing his work, often unnoticed by the public. And in a way, that makes him even more interesting. Because Lukas Haas never truly vanished. He just changed course. He had a small role in Inception, another in The Revenant. And every time he pops up, people have the same reaction. Wait, Is that the kid from Witness? The answer is yes, and he is still acting, still showing up, just not the way people remember. Maybe because the industry never knew what to do with an actor who refused to shout. But if you ask those who grew up watching him, Lukas Haas left a mark. A subtle one, a quiet one, but a real one. And sometimes that is the kind that lasts longest. Kirk Cameron was not just a teen star, he was the teen star. The poster on the bedroom wall, the cover of every teen magazine, the heartthrob your sister would not stop talking about. And at the center of it all was Growing Pains, a hit sitcom that made him a household name. He played Mike Seaver, the charming troublemaker with a perfect smile and perfect timing. Audiences loved him. Producers loved him. It seemed like there was no limit to how high he could climb. For a while, that was true. His face was everywhere. Talk shows, red carpets, even movies. He had that 1980s shine, the kind that comes once in a generation. And behind the scenes, he was seen as a professional. Polite, focused, ready for anything. But something was shifting inside him, and it was not something Hollywood was prepared for. In his late teens, Kirk Cameron became a born-again Christian, and that decision changed everything. He no longer saw his career as entertainment, he saw it as a platform. That kind of shift, especially so young, put him at odds with the people who once supported him. He started choosing faith over fame, conviction over contracts, and it cost him. But to him, that cost was worth it, because it meant staying true to what he believed. It is rare to see someone walk away from the peak of their career without regret, but Kirk did exactly that. He began to push back on storylines and scripts that did not align with his beliefs. He requested rewrites, refused certain plot lines, clashed with producers, and slowly his public image shifted. Fans were confused, studios pulled back, and the boy who once could do no wrong found himself on the outside of the very system that had once embraced him. After Growing Pains ended, Kirk tried to stay in the game. He took a few roles, starred in faith-based projects, but he had made his choice. He was no longer playing by the rules of the industry. He was writing his own. And that came with consequences. For every loyal fan who followed him, there were others who walked away. These days, Kirk Cameron is still very much in the public eye, just not in the same places. He focuses on religious programming, Christian films, and faith-centered activism. He speaks at churches, hosts events, writes books. But as far as mainstream Hollywood goes, he is almost completely absent. For people who grew up with Growing Pains, it can be hard to reconcile the Mike Seaver they remember with the Kirk Cameron of today. The smile is still the same. The conviction is stronger than ever. But the fame? That vanished a long time ago. And maybe that was his plan all along, to stop performing for the world and start living for something else. Whatever you think of his choices, you cannot say he disappeared without a trace. He left a very specific trail behind. The secret world of Alex Mack felt like someone handed you a diary filled with electric secrets and said, "This is what growing up really feels like." Not just the awkward parts or the funny bits, but the transformation, the fear, the pressure to hide who you are just to survive middle school. Alex Mack was just a normal girl until one accident gave her superpowers: telekinesis, shape-shifting, even turning into a silver puddle. But here's the thing. It was never really about the powers. It was about what you do when you are different and scared and trying to stay invisible. It was about lying to your best friend because the truth might ruin everything. About hiding from the people who say they want to help but only want to control you. About looking in the mirror and not knowing what version of yourself is going to show up that day. It captured all the weirdness of adolescence and wrapped it in science fiction that felt just close enough to possible. The show had a grit to it. Not dark, but raw. It did not sugarcoat the fear of getting caught or the anxiety of not being normal. And yet, it still found space for humor, for friendship, for those little wins that make being a teenager bearable. Alex was smart, brave, messy, and real. Her world was complicated. Her choices were heavy. And you watched because somewhere deep down, you wondered what secrets might be hiding in your own world too. What if something in you was strange, or powerful, or both? The secret world of Alex Mack was not a fantasy. It was a mirror, and sometimes it showed us more than we were ready to see. Haley Joel Osment saw dead people, and then he saw no one. As the wide-eyed child in The Sixth Sense, he stunned the world. Critics, audiences, directors, everyone called him a prodigy. And for a while, he lived up to every inch of it, role after role, award after award. But then, the industry did what it always does. It moved on. Or maybe Haley did first. He made the boldest move a child star can make. He disappeared by choice, not by scandal. In doing so, he proved that fame did not own him, even when the world tried to claim him. Instead of chasing fame into his teenage years, Haley made a decision most child stars never even consider. He stepped away, went to college, lived among classmates who barely knew he had once terrified Bruce Willis on screen. He studied acting not to keep the fame alive, but to understand it better, to rebuild it on his own terms. And when he did return, it was not as the fresh-faced boy we remembered. It was as a character actor, bearded, funny, strange. He leaned into roles that were bizarre, offbeat, sometimes unrecognizable. And maybe that was the point. He had no interest in being who we remembered. He wanted to be someone new. Haley never really disappeared. He transformed, quietly, with grace. He avoided the crash, the scandal, the tragedy. And somehow, that made him stand out even more. In a world of child stars who vanish under the weight of what they were, Haley Joel Osment simply chose to become something else. Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle was the quietest chaos in the house, and maybe the best part of the entire show. Erik Per Sullivan played him with a kind of genius that people often overlook in child actors. He was unpredictable, offbeat, somehow both the weirdest and the most lovable member of the family. But once the show ended, something odd happened. Erik did not just take a break, he disappeared entirely. No tabloid drama, no failed comebacks, no wild interviews, just silence. After one final voice role and a small indie film, he dropped out of Hollywood and never looked back. For years, fans searched. There were fake accounts, Reddit threads, even hoaxes. People genuinely wanted to know, where did Dewey go? Unlike other former child actors, Erik did not feed the nostalgia machine. He did not show up at reunions, did not post throwbacks. He just walked away from everything, which made it all the more mysterious. People speculated that maybe he wanted a normal life. Maybe he had just outgrown the spotlight. He had always been more reserved in interviews, more thoughtful. Maybe it all just became too much. What we do know is that he enrolled in college. He stayed close to his hometown. And he left the fame behind like it was never something he needed in the first place. Still, the absence feels loud. Malcolm in the Middle is one of those shows people return to again and again, and Dewey's disappearance is the one thing no one can quite wrap their heads around. When you watch it now, you find yourself focusing on his lines more closely. You look for signs, for clues. But maybe the answer is simple. Maybe Erik Per Sullivan just wanted to live his life without the noise. Even so, it is hard not to feel a little sad about it. Not because he owes anyone anything, but because we never got to say thank you or goodbye. You did not just watch Johnny Whitaker, you rooted for him. He had that open-hearted charm that made every kid wish he was their best friend. Whether he was playing Jody on Family Affair or swinging from trees in Tom Sawyer, Johnny had a way of filling a screen with something warm and honest. And for a while, it felt like he would always be around. But just like that, he vanished. Not in the scandalous, headlines-grabbing kind of way, but in the quiet way that makes you wonder if anyone noticed at all. Back in the 1970s, Johnny Whitaker was everywhere. His red hair and wide grin were part of the American television landscape. He was not just cast in roles. He was the role. He brought a kind of innocence to every character that felt real, even in the most scripted moments. And then, it stopped. Audiences got older, networks changed, and the industry did what it always does. It let go of the kids it once praised. Johnny struggled with that shift. Like many former child stars, he battled addiction, lost direction, and had to rebuild a life without the applause. But he never became a tabloid fixture. Instead, he tried to help others, working with recovery programs, staying involved in support groups, and quietly trying to turn things around. Still, his career never returned. Hollywood had moved on, and Johnny, it seemed, had moved on too. There is something especially haunting about his story, not because it ended in tragedy, but because it faded so gently. No crash, no comeback. Just a boy we once knew, whose smile lit up the screen, stepping out of the frame. And for those who grew up with him, it leaves a strange kind of ache. Like turning on an old show and realizing the kid you remember is gone, and you never got the chance to say goodbye. The Puzzle Place was one of those shows that never needed to shout to be heard. It just knew exactly what it was saying. You probably do not remember the name of every puppet or the exact town they lived in, but you remember the colors, the kindness, the honesty. You remember that feeling when everyone sat together and worked through something real. The Puzzle Place was about friendship, yes, but not the easy kind. It was about learning to understand someone who was different from you, different skin, different family, different story, and still choosing to care. These puppets did not just teach diversity, they lived it. They argued. They misunderstood each other. They asked big questions and stumbled through the answers together. Each character had their own voice, their own culture, and their own point of view. And for a children's show in the 1990s, that was groundbreaking. You were not just watching another Be Kind show. You were seeing race, religion, culture, and conflict in a way that felt gentle and real. Sometimes it was uncomfortable. Sometimes it was funny. But it was always human. And it never felt forced. What made it work was that the problems were never too big to feel fake or too small to feel pointless. They were just big enough to matter to you, big enough to echo in your own life. Watching it now, you might wonder how it ever got made. A show this intentional, this thoughtful, this honest about what it means to be part of a community. The Puzzle Place let kids ask the hard questions before adults told them not to. It gave you space to think, and more importantly, space to feel. And now, looking back, you realize it was not just a kids' show. It was an early lesson in empathy, one we all probably needed more than we ever knew. Michael Oliver was the kind of kid who could turn chaos into comedy. As Junior in Problem Child, he was everything the title promised: wild, loud, hilarious, and just a little dangerous. He was not your typical sweet-faced Hollywood kid. He was a troublemaker you could not help but love. And then, like the perfect punchline to a joke we did not see coming, he was gone. His exit was sudden, but the signs were always there. The Problem Child films made money, but they also made problems. Legal disputes, managerial chaos, allegations of financial exploitation. Behind the scenes, Michael's world was unraveling before it even had a chance to begin. By the time he was a teenager, the industry had already burned him out. He did not just step away, he stepped back into anonymity. And he has rarely looked back. Today, Michael lives far from Hollywood's orbit. He is not trying to reclaim fame. He is not on reality shows or writing tell-all books. He is just living, quietly, on his terms. And that silence says more than any interview could. It says he chose peace over applause, privacy over profit. That, maybe the only happy ending left for a child actor, is to become someone the world forgets. It is easy to think of these stars as lost, but maybe they are not lost at all. Maybe they just escaped. And in Michael's case, maybe disappearing was the bravest thing he ever did. There was a time in the 1990s when Jonathan Taylor Thomas was everywhere. Posters in every locker, magazines with his face on the cover. If you were growing up during that era, chances are you either had a crush on him or knew someone who did. He was the voice of young Simba in The Lion King. He was Randy Taylor on Home Improvement. He even starred in feel-good family movies that aired every weekend. But then, just like that, he disappeared. No scandal, no burnout. Just a quiet exit, like he had somewhere better to be. What made it so baffling was how smoothly everything was going. Jonathan was one of those rare child stars who seemed to get it right. He was articulate in interviews. He kept his private life private. And he always seemed just a little more thoughtful than the usual teen idol, which makes his exit all the more fascinating. He left Home Improvement before the final season, choosing instead to focus on school. Not acting school, college. He wanted to study philosophy and history. And he actually did. He went to Harvard, then Columbia. While most teen celebrities leaned into the fame machine, Jonathan Taylor Thomas pulled the emergency brake. He wanted something else, something quieter. Of course, rumors followed. Was he sick? Was he in trouble? But the truth seems simpler, and maybe more mature. He just wanted to live a normal life. He did a few guest spots on television over the years, but nothing major. Every time he reappeared, it felt more like a favor than a comeback. Fans never really got closure. There was no farewell interview, no final movie, just a slow fade out. And maybe that is what he wanted all along. Still, it left a hole. Because Jonathan Taylor Thomas was not just a teen idol, he was a part of growing up. And when he stepped away, it felt like someone had quietly turned out the lights on a whole chapter of youth. There was something about Adam Rich. Maybe it was the bowl haircut, or the oversized sweaters, or that shy smile that made every parent want to adopt him and every kid want to be him. As Nicholas on 8 is Enough, he was America's youngest TV brother, small, sweet, and smart beyond his years. And then, just like that, he was gone. No press conference, no final role, just gone. Back in the 1970s, 8 is Enough was the kind of show that families planned their evenings around. It was appointment television, the emotional glue of the week. And Nicholas? He was the scene stealer, but Adam's real life was never as neatly wrapped as the episodes he starred in. The fame came early and heavy, and for a while it looked like he would be one of the few child stars who would make it. But childhood fame has a sharp edge, and Adam bled slowly from it. By the time the 1980s rolled around, the spotlight had moved on. He took fewer roles, and the ones he did take never brought the same light. Behind closed doors, addiction crept in. Arrests followed. Rehab came and went. Adam was fighting battles he never signed up for, shaped by an industry that never taught him how to live without applause. And when he finally stepped back from public life, it was not for a new career or a quiet retirement. It was because he had nothing left to give the screen. When Adam passed away in 2023, it was one of those headlines that made people pause. Wait, Adam Rich? He was still around? Yes, he was. He just was not on our screens anymore. He disappeared without saying goodbye. And maybe the hardest part is realizing that no one asked where he went until he was gone for good. The big comfy couch was more than just a place for Lunette to stretch into impossible clock shapes. It was a place that felt safe, soft, and a little bit magic. It is hard to explain to anyone who did not grow up with it why a clown on a couch could be comforting, why a talking doll named Molly could feel like your best friend. But the show had a way of slowing down the world. You would turn it on, and suddenly everything felt like it was okay. Like there was time. Time to clean up the mess. Time to figure out your feelings. Time to be silly without being wrong. Lunette's voice was always gentle, even when she was mad. And those little stories she acted out with Molly on the floor, they hit different. They were not just make-believe. They were metaphors. Quiet little life lessons wrapped up in tea parties and feather dusters. The couch itself felt like a portal. Oversized, exaggerated, and a little surreal. But that was the point. The whole set felt like it belonged to someone who understood what it felt like to be small in a world that never slowed down. You watched for the laughs, the games, the naps on the couch, but you stayed because somewhere in the chaos there was love. Real, kind, patient love. The kind you maybe did not even notice until you missed it. The big comfy couch taught kids that messes could be cleaned up, feelings could be worked through, and everyone has a space where they are allowed to just be. And when Lunette looked into the camera, you really believed she saw you. Not a demographic, not a viewer. You, the kid who needed a break, the kid who needed a laugh, the kid who just wanted someone to sit beside them on the couch and say, "Let's figure it out together." Charles Herbert was not just a child actor, he was the child actor of the 1950s. With over 40 feature films and dozens of television appearances before the age of 16, he was a household name at a time when television was still earning its place in the American living room. Audiences adored him. Studios wanted more of him. And like so many before and after, Charles gave the world every bit of himself before he was old enough to realize what that meant. But the applause that lifted him up became the silence that swallowed him. As he grew older, the roles dried up, his voice changed, his face matured, and suddenly the golden boy of the silver screen was just another forgotten teenager. The transition from child star to adult actor is a narrow bridge few can cross, and Charles slipped through the cracks. The phone stopped ringing. The fan letters stopped coming. The boy who had once earned more than his own parents now found himself struggling to survive. He spoke, later in life, with haunting honesty about the pain of growing up in the spotlight, about being used, managed, and then left behind. He battled addiction, faced poverty, and for years, he vanished from the public eye. But unlike many who disappear in silence, Charles eventually came back, not to act, but to tell his story, to warn others. He never blamed the audience. He never lashed out at the industry. He simply revealed the truth, that childhood is not a commodity. And fame, especially when given to a child, is never a gift without cost. Charles Herbert did not just disappear. He faded, slowly, quietly, and with more grace than the world ever gave him. Alex D. Linz had one of those faces that defined an era. If you were a kid in the early 2000s, you knew him, even if you did not know his name. He was the kid in Max Keeble's Big Move. He was in Home Alone 3. He was always playing the underdog, the clever kid, the one who would outsmart every adult in the room. His energy was infectious, his timing always sharp, and then, just like that, he was gone. There was no grand exit, no dramatic role that wrapped it all up. He simply stopped appearing in films, and for a child actor who had been everywhere, it was confusing. No one really expected Alex D. Linz to just vanish. As it turns out, acting had never been his long-term goal. After a few more television roles in his early teens, he quietly walked away from Hollywood. He chose school, studied hard, pursued a completely different life, and he never looked back. There was something refreshing about how low-key it was. No social media goodbye, no "Where Are They Now" tour. He just exited stage left and let the spotlight land on someone else. But for fans, especially those who watched his movies on repeat, it was bittersweet. He had been part of so many Saturday afternoons, so many sleepovers, so many moments where the only thing that mattered was whether the kid on screen would win in the end. And then, suddenly, that kid was gone. Rewatching Max Keeble's Big Move now feels strange. It is still funny, still smart. But there is a ghost of something there, a sense that we never really got to see what Alex D. Linz might have become. Or maybe we did. Maybe he knew exactly when to leave. And maybe that kind of quiet exit is its own kind of happy ending. No noise, no burnout, just a clean break from a loud business. There is something about Brandon Cruz that always stuck with people. Maybe it was the scruffy hair or the way he always spoke like he was thinking 3 thoughts ahead. As Eddie on The Courtship of Eddie's Father, he brought a unique kind of honesty to the screen. He was not the polished, well-behaved TV kid. He was curious, opinionated, real. And that made him unforgettable. For a few years, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Brandon Cruz was a household name. And then, he was not. He had that rare quality, natural charm without a trace of calculation. His chemistry with Bill Bixby gave the show its heart, and their scenes together felt like real-life father and son moments. There was a gentleness in his presence, a thoughtful kind of mischief that made him feel like a real kid, not a product. which is why, when he stepped away from acting, it felt like someone closed a book mid-chapter. The show ended, as shows do. But Brandon did not stick around in the way so many others tried to. He took a different path entirely. Music, activism, punk rock of all things. He fronted a band called Doctor. No, became involved in the punk scene and made it clear that he was not chasing his past. He was building something new. But that meant leaving the Hollywood version of himself behind. And for most of America, that looked like disappearing. He was not in the tabloids, not on reunion specials, not even on the nostalgia circuit. He just lived his life, on his terms, outside the bubble of fame. There is a kind of strength in that. But it also meant that the boy who once sat at the heart of one of television's most heartfelt shows slowly became a question mark. People would say, "Whatever happened to Eddie?" and never quite get a full answer. Because Brandon Cruz is one of those rare child stars who did not fall from grace. He walked away from it. Still, for those who grew up watching him joke around with Bill Bixby on primetime television, it is hard not to feel the absence. The Eddie we knew never got a send-off. He just stopped appearing. And in that silence, something about childhood slipped away too. Eureeka's castle was pure bedtime story magic, the kind that wrapped around your brain like a lullaby and whispered, "Let's stay in make-believe a little longer." It was not trying to sell you anything. It was not speeding up your attention span. It was a slow, weird, wonderful puppet world living inside a musical castle, and somehow that made perfect sense to you as a kid. Eureeka was a young wizard in training, curious, clumsy, full of charm, and the whole castle was her playground. There was a dragon who could not stop sneezing. There were mice who ran a kitchen. There was even a wind-up bat with a singing voice. Every corner of that castle felt alive, like it was breathing with imagination. But what really made it work was how unafraid it was to be quiet, to sit in a song, to wander through a story without rushing the ending. It was soft, in the best way. It had this dreamy tone that felt like reading a picture book under a blanket, and the puppets had so much personality that you would forget they were foam and felt. The music was warm, the stories were silly but never empty, and there was always this undercurrent of kindness, like no matter what went wrong, the castle would still be there in the morning. Eureeka's castle was not about learning letters or solving mysteries. It was about learning how to feel safe in the world, one tiny adventure at a time. It did not matter if the plot made sense. What mattered was that you felt welcomed. You felt soothed. And maybe that is why it stayed with you longer than you expected. It was not a show you watched to get hyped. It was a show you watched to feel held. Amanda Bynes made us laugh when laughter felt simple. From all that to The Amanda Show, she carried an entire generation's sense of humor on her back. She was magnetic, quick, sharp, and brilliantly expressive. For every child of the late 90s and early 2000s, Amanda was not just a star. She was the moment. And then, one day, the smiles stopped coming. The world watched as Amanda's story began to shift. Headlines replaced punchlines. Her brilliance began unraveling in front of millions. Social media, paparazzi, cruel late-night jokes, it all became part of her unraveling. Mental health challenges took center stage, and the industry that once cheered for her now seemed to look away. But Amanda never gave up. She stepped out of the spotlight and into treatment. She focused on healing, on education, even enrolling in fashion school. She spoke about her struggles with painful honesty, never pretending things were easier than they were. It was raw, it was heartbreaking, and it was real. Today, she keeps a low profile, trying to rebuild something private and safe. The child who once lit up screens is now simply trying to find peace. And maybe that is the bravest role of all, not the comeback, but the quiet. Amanda Bynes may have vanished from our screens, but she never stopped mattering. Cousin Skeeter was the kind of show that made you do a double take the first time you saw it, because there was no warning for how loud, fast, and absolutely unfiltered it was. A puppet, not animated, not digital. A real, in-your-face puppet, dropped right into the middle of a live-action family sitcom like he owned the place. And somehow, he kind of did. Cousin Skeeter was Bobby's cousin, sure, but he was also your cousin, the one who was always saying something wild at the dinner table, getting you in trouble, then making you laugh so hard you forgot why you were mad. He had that energy, the energy that made teachers roll their eyes and kids cheer louder. His jokes hit fast. His entrances were louder than anything else on Nickelodeon. But under all that chaos was something rare. Skeeter, for all his wild behavior, was never mean. He messed up, yeah, but he showed up for Bobby every single time. The show had a rhythm that was impossible to ignore. It blended urban culture, slapstick comedy, and family dynamics in a way that no other show at the time dared to do. And let us not gloss over the fact that it was one of the few kids' shows that put Black culture and Black family life right at the center, without turning it into a lesson. Just life, just jokes, just real. Watching Cousin Skeeter now is like hearing an old mixtape from your childhood. The jokes might land different. The puppet might look a little out of place. But the feeling? Still gold. It was loud and loving and absolutely unique. There is nothing on television today quite like it. And honestly, we were lucky to grow up with it, even if we had no idea what we had until it was gone. If one of these teen stars made you remember something you had not thought about in years, tell us in the comments. Tap like if you felt it too, and subscribe so you never miss the stories that time almost forgot.